I want to present to you Donald Wilson Bush, who stands right here beside me. He's the president of the Woodrow Wilson Legacy Foundation. He holds degrees from Montreal College, King College, and Reformed Theological Seminary, and he is a descendant of both Woodrow Wilson and the Bush family and others of great distinction, and is doing amazing work here in Armenia and elsewhere. And he's going to speak to you for 7 or 8 minutes, and then we're going to conclude. Those of you who are at the microphone, I'm afraid we won't have time for any more questions. I apologize, but you saw where the time went and how it went. No, sir. Please.
Good afternoon, members of the clergy, government leaders, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Donald Wilson Bush, and I am a Woodrow Wilson family descendant, but I have the unique distinction of being related to at least 3 U.S. presidents, representing 2 seemingly irreconcilable ideological approaches to executing American foreign policy, namely political idealism and political realism. After hearing today's presentations, I am convinced now more than ever that only one of these ideological traditions, namely idealism, is capable of inspiring the kind of effective leadership necessary to mobilize the international will to intervene in the case of genocide and to hold its perpetrators accountable for their crimes. But if we can ever hope to eliminate the consequences of genocide and its causes, we must not go to the other extreme and throw away realism in the process. The only answer is to educate and to train a new generation of political leaders capable of striking a crucial balance between these 2 approaches. As Henry David Thoreau once said, if you have built your castle in the sky, you are not lost. Simply take the time to build the stairs up to meet it. While in purely philosophical terms, these 2 words, idealism and realism, are quite flexible and can be molded to fit nearly any conversation free of consequence, it is widely held in some elite political, economic, and military circles that idealism and the appeal to the way things ought to be is a dangerous way to approach foreign affairs, because idealism clouds the mind and keeps our leaders away from any probability of political outcomes that don't fit the circumstances actually facing them. Idealism can also render political leaders ineffective in diplomatic negotiations, they say, because it makes them appear inflexible and arrogant, like Woodrow Wilson was portrayed to have appeared at the Paris Peace Conference following World War I. As a consequence of this caricature, many formidable scholars and respected professionals fault Wilson for his idealism. Furthermore, they cited his failed efforts to repatriate the Armenian people back to their ancestral homeland after the genocide, and his failure to restore their cultural and economic viability as evidence of this shortcoming. Now, realism, by contrast, is seen by many among the political, governmental, and military elite to be much more straightforward and pragmatic, especially when we're dealing with critical issues of foreign affairs, because leaders of this persuasion are able to see things as they really are, as opposed to the way they wish them to be. Their only challenge is to choose the right response to circumstances unfettered by any idealistic restraints. Now, an equal number of scholars and professionals, perhaps on the other side of this debate, fault neoconservatives since the end of the Cold War for retooling President Eisenhower's military-industrial complex into a perpetual military-industrial war machine. Whereas it is certainly beyond the scope of this short speech to fully develop an adequate presentation of these 2 traditions, it is my pleasure, nevertheless, to be here with you today in this historic venue to briefly discuss the importance of educating and raising up a new generation of young world leaders from every nation, especially from the United States and Russia, who can achieve a necessary equilibrium between idealism and realism as they begin to weigh the implications of both these approaches to executing foreign policy, specifically as it pertains to their own sense of free moral agency and personality development as leaders. The title of my address to you this afternoon is Reviving Wilsonian Idealism in a Realistic World: Fair Compensation for Victims of Genocide in the Western Civic Tradition. Although this is a lengthy title, I have deliberately chosen it to reintroduce political idealism in the Wilsonian tradition as a necessary counterbalance to runaway realism that has come to define American foreign policy ever since Henry Kissinger threw that balance away during the Cold War. This is also my starting point for discussing the unique role that I believe the young and independent Republic of Armenia has suddenly found itself playing on the world stage relative to the unsettled claims she still holds against the Turkish state for ignoring the causes and the consequences of the Armenian genocide planned and executed by their predecessors. Ignored for the last 100 years and overlooked mainly because of its relatively limited economic options for effecting growth in this region, the Republic of Armenia has nevertheless emerged as a global symbol of persistence and existential will on the part of a transnationally defined people group, numbering more than 10 million souls scattered across 6 continents, who has suddenly awakened the conscience of the world. In no small way, Woodrow Wilson's life, legacy, and idealism influenced this outcome in their present state of affairs. But I am here to say that it could have gone better for Armenia and the world had Woodrow Wilson actually achieved that crucial balance between these two approaches to American foreign policy, which, I'm sad to say, he did not. As we all know, President Wilson began advocating for their survival in 1915, predicating his decision to support their cause on idealistic higher principles of justice and goodwill. But as history clearly shows, the realists in Congress beat him soundly, and his magnanimous effort to satisfy the Armenian claims against the modern Turkish state lost out to economic interests and geopolitical positioning of larger nation states that eventually led to the Cold War and Armenia's downsizing and regional marginalization. To this day, the small Republic of Armenia still finds herself landlocked and dependent upon negotiated settlements with surrounding nation states for her very survival. Yet she persists in the faith that justice will eventually be served. Today, I want to commend President Sargsyan for honoring the rich heritage of his people's past while simultaneously providing the energy and focus necessary for leading them into a future that keeps this faith alive. I also want to commend President Sargsyan for maintaining the crucial balance between idealism and realism that is required to implement best practices in education in Armenia that can raise up a new generation of leaders who will also keep this faith alive. This faith in a just future for all minor nations with major grievances against those who would try to dominate them, I contend this faith is grounded in an idealism that sustains the Western civic tradition. This faith, I contend, is grounded in an idealism that binds a democratic people to its constitution. This faith, I contend, is grounded in an idealism that sustains the self-restraint of every citizen in a democracy with the promise that an appropriate court exists somewhere, at some level, with the adequate and legitimate jurisdiction to settle every claim against injustice to the satisfaction of the aggrieved parties. Yet, when perpetrators of a crime are never summoned before a neutral court to show cause for their actions, victims to the crime are robbed of their rights to satisfaction under the law, offered in the spirit of this ideal assumption, and the faith that justice will eventually be served is broken. Specifically addressing the crime of genocide, satisfaction under the law can only be realized by the victims when perpetrators of the act are confronted with the evidence of their crime in a recognized court of law. Following this, judgment of their guilt must be rendered in each case, and restitution may be large or small, but without receiving restitution in the predictable course of due process, justice cannot be served. Accordingly, victims to a crime need not declare themselves satisfied when in fact they are not. The question is, how do we finish the task of forging a real path to legal redress on behalf of the 1.5 million Armenian victims to the genocide and their heirs, with outstanding claims against the Turkish state for a list of crimes including unlawful detainer, aggravated assault, theft, rape, murder, starvation, deportation, and yes, the G word, genocide. Modern history is a record of the world's community of nations slowly orienting themselves and their relevant judicial systems toward achieving the ideal goal of adjudicating every crime. How does the old saying go? No crime should go unpunished? Well, at this time in the real world of foreign affairs, questions of jurisdiction and prosecutorial authority are still being raised in relation to the transnational institutions that have already been created to hear the Armenian case and to bear witness to the Armenian loss. Sadly, the Republic of Turkey and the United States of America are two nations, among others, still resisting any obligation to achieve this ideal. But this was not always the case. Last week, my congressman, the Honorable Adam Schiff, attended an event at the St. Leon Armenian Cathedral in Burbank, California. Congressman Schiff had this to say about the present position of the United States in advocating for the Armenian cause, and I quote, "Although it was once a witness to this crime of genocide perpetuated by the Ottoman Turks against 1.5 million Armenians, our country, the United States, is today a bystander. I am working to move our government from being a bystander back to being a witness again," end quote. When referring to the United States as a witness to the crime of Armenian genocide, Congressman Schiff is, of course, referring to the time period during and immediately following World War I, when Woodrow Wilson, 28th President of the United States, for all of his faults, advocated for the lives of the surviving Armenians. Although he failed to mobilize the international will to intervene in the case of the Armenian genocide and to hold its perpetrators accountable, Woodrow Wilson did not fail to inspire a new generation of leaders to carry on with this noble and ideal cause, and I know lots of them. In the end, this is a clear testimony to the power of idealism in foreign affairs. In conclusion, let me say that after 100 years of a swinging imbalance in favor of political realism that leaves us wanting that clear path to legal redress on behalf of Armenians as the aggrieved party, I am prepared to spend my time and my efforts and my resources to train a new generation of leaders who can finally achieve it. In no uncertain terms, and in no small measure, the rich history of the Armenian people as the cradle of human civilization compels us to hold this course until the ideal manifestation of an unbiased, comprehensive, and universal justice is achieved on behalf of the 1.5 million lives that we will commemorate on Friday, the 24th of April. However, beginning with breakfast and coffee on the morning of April 25th, I am recommitting my energies and the rest of my life to championing the Armenian cause on behalf of all humanity, and I invite you to do the same thing with me. This centennial commemoration in Yerevan is the end of nothing. Rather, it marks the new beginning of a renewed effort to remind ourselves and the world that Armenia matters because humanity matters. Armenia matters because justice matters. Please stand with me as I endeavor to stand with the Armenian people, just as Woodrow Wilson did, in a committed effort to leave our children and our grandchildren with a more peaceful world. Your commitment is not only desired, it is necessary to achieve this goal. In the words of Johann Wolfgang Goethe, until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. However, concerning all matters of initiative and creativity, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. And that simple idea is this, that at the moment one commits himself or herself to act, then providence follows too, and all manner of incidents, meetings, and financial assistance comes your way that might otherwise never have occurred. So whatever you can do or dream you can do, begin it right now, for boldness has beauty, power, and magic in it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Donald.